Welcome back to Mastering Video Marketing. I'm Tony Reale.
And I am Ben Carlson.
Today, we're going to talk about what gear to purchase when you're just getting started as a filmmaker, as a video producer. And this can be applicable to you if you are an independent, just a hobbyist. We'll run the gamut, but it also can be applicable. Say you're a company that's deciding if you want to add video production, a department, for your marketing department.
Yeah.
You can take all of this advice. The goal with this podcast is really to kind of give you a general understanding of where to prioritize gear.
Right.
It is not to say we own a heck of a lot more than the gear we're going to talk about, but this is about where to start because it can get really overwhelmed. There's so many cameras out there. There's so much type of gear. Do I need this equipment? Do I need a dolly? Do I need a gimbal? Those are questions that people might be asking, and we're going to cover all that.
Yeah.
We're going to discuss where to really focus your money first.
And this is a question that we get all the time, like you said, not just from individuals, but from businesses as well. And it's one of the things that we often coach businesses with is, here's how you set up. And some people want just a simple streaming setup. And they're like, all right, we just need something for our conference room that we can have a decent webcam. Others, it's, hey, we want to have a full-blown video department. Help us with that. So this is a really popular question.
And to go off of that, we're going to do another episode where we talk about streaming because that's like its own thing.
You're right.
So this is more about I want to shoot videos, corporate videos, films, whatever it might be. And so that's where would you then want to optimize your budget there? Because yes, streaming is its own beast, and we definitely want to talk about that in its own thing because that's something that post-COVID we started doing a lot more, and now it's like a whole division of Creative Edge for us.
Sure. And I think we should start at the very basics with, we hear a lot of people, I'll just shoot it on my phone. We'll get it on my phone, it'll be fine. And mobile videography and photography has come so far.
Absolutely. When we were first getting started, we were just happy that our phone shot a picture.
Yeah.
Or the most, I have a couple really early episodes of NextWaveDV where I had I think my Palm Pre was the first one that shot okay video, remotely usable.
Sure. Yeah.
And I uploaded a couple of YouTube videos of behind the scenes when we're on a shoot. So if you go look those up, really old stuff, you'll see Sean and I on some of our first corporate video shoots.
Yeah.
And but there was no way I was ever going to use that in any level of professional.
Yeah.
Nowadays it can be halfway decent.
Absolutely. And so, again, we could do a whole nother segment on mobile. That's one that I love to do. There's a whole lot of options out there. But I think if you are looking to go that next step up, there you can invest a lot in lenses and, small rig, make some great housing units for phones that make it a viable production. But if we're talking elevating, you really want to start stepping into that professional level. It would be hard to walk onto set for a company that's paying you thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, and be like, all right, got my iPhone 14, we're ready to go.
Exactly.
Even with a nice mount. So what do we start with?
I just want to finish your thought real quick and say that we talk about in our Video Pathfinder webinar, we talk about the different types of categories of social media, and the really quick the first ones we talk about is polish post, and then we get into candid content, and then there's the other two categories that check it out for free online, videopathfinder.com. It's a great resource and asset for people that are just wanting to know how do I even approach social media advertising and marketing for your business. But that second category of candid content is a really important one because that's really what shows the personality of a brand. And it's something that is sometimes overlooked or undervalued.
Sure.
Some businesses are just I guess we'll throw a thing up, but we emphasize, we're a video production company. We produce really pretty looking videos. But we still take behind the scenes pictures with our phones, and we don't need to have another. Sometimes we will get cinematic behind the scenes, but just grabbing a few shots with our phone. So that's why I bring up that candid content. That's where shooting stuff on your phone is the best way to approach it because it is important content, and we explain it a lot more in the webinar. Again, completely free, so check it out. But use your phone for the right tool. It's a right tool for the right job.
Right.
I used to carry around a behind-the-scenes camera, or I would go to the camera van and bring an extra behind-the-scenes camera. But as cell phones have gotten better, it's just grab it on my phone.
Right. Yeah.
It's a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah.
And then I can be more consistent and not forgetting it too.
Exactly. Because the best phone or the best camera is the one that you have on you.
Yep, absolutely. So the first place to start in this conversation actually is going to be jumping ship into the direction of like film school. For some people, they're always questioning, like, should I get it? Should I go to film school? That was a question that I had at the very beginning of my interest in filmmaking, because there's, it can be overwhelming. And if you want to go the direction, like, this is something that I want to do for a future career or a side business or whatever it might be, you need to have some level of completeness to your understanding. We've talked about it before, that like the 3 steps to being a professional is knowing how to take a great shot, having great equipment to be able to accomplish a great shot, and then knowing how to use that equipment to accomplish the great shot. So I say before, like, don't consider yourself a professional until you can master all 3 of those things. And knowing how to get a good shot in and of itself can be something you can learn at a film school. But if you're the type of person, if you're like me, if you're like Ben, if you are like a person that can glean information and kind of use the internet as an aggregate of all the different types of things, and then you can kind of watch videos here and watch some of our content, watch other people's content, and start developing your own education, then you can save a ton of money. And instead of putting that money into film school, which can be tens of thousands of dollars, you could put that into a camera equipment. And that's what I did. That was the origins of Creative Edge. Was I started spending, I got cheap cameras off of eBay and started playing around with them. And then I got a little bit nicer and a little bit nicer, until I was at the point where I'm like, I just need to start a company so I can write these off for taxes.
Right.
And then it turned into a thing. So film school is great for some people, but I also say, using that money and putting it into camera equipment can be at the beginning of a career for you.
And if you are just getting started, or maybe you have a little bit of a portfolio and you're trying to weigh that out, I think, we partner with a film school and we do a lot of mentoring with a lot of the students. And that to me is even more valuable. So what I would say is, get the equipment and then go out and shoot and start building up a portfolio. So just shoot anything, everything. Just start making short films that suck. That's okay. They can suck, because you're going to get better and better. And when you have that portfolio, then you can go to a production house and say, hey, I'll do I'll push your cart for you. Just let me be on set. And that, I would say, is even more valuable than any film school, is like once getting on set.
Learning how things are done and why they're done. Like watching experienced DPs, directors of photography that can, like, I even know like a friend of mine that was like a really great photographer that got into video, and he would direct some things, and he would say, like, I would just, even though I could do it, I would hire an experienced director of photography, because I learned so much from him. And it made, like, it's interesting, even though the DP is below the director, a lot of times, like a director, like novice directors will hire a super experienced DP, because they will kind of fill in the blanks and guide them through that process. So working with team members that can really just help you learn the process better is such an important part of that. So now let's get into equipment. And the most logical place to start is a camera. Nothing without, if you don't have something to shoot video, then, none of the other stuff matters. So where to start for cameras? Now, again, when we were first starting, we had standard video cameras. And if we wanted to get that shallow depth of field look, we would have to either try and fake it by the first hack that we would do is we would step like really, really far back, zoom really, really far in, and then you would kind of be able to get that shallow depth of field, or depth of field adapters, which, again, if you watch some of my early videos, you'll see me playing around with depth of field adapters as kind of the starting point for me. Thankfully, we don't have to do that anymore. And now pretty much every camera that you can purchase, even inexpensive ones, are interchangeable lens cameras. So if you want a traditional video camera, the advantage to that is that it's got a built-in lens. You don't have to buy additional lenses. It's self-contained. You can zoom in and out with that. They are great. Usually I recommend those still for churches, for houses of worship and event centers, where they need a multicam shoot and they have different focal lengths. Some of them are zoomed in, some are a little bit wider, and they have consistency across all the cameras. They don't have like a bunch of different things. Like, someday I'm going to do a video where I sit down with every single camera I own and show why I've purchased them over the years.
Oh, that'll be cool.
But I don't have two of the same cameras.
Right.
I have lots of different, like I'll have multiple Sonys, but not two exact same cameras.
Yeah.
Because for me, they're tools for a job. But when you're doing event shooting or multicam shooting, it's a heck of a lot easier to have all the same cameras because even having different lenses, like the color science of each camera, even in like from one Sony generation to the next, they always tweak it.
Yep.
And then going from like if I had Canon lenses and then Sony lenses on it, or even like a different Sony lens, that can color the image differently too. So again, we're talking about event stuff, but the truth of the matter is standard video cameras are still great and they're a heck of a lot easier to utilize. But if you want control over your depth of field and if you want to treat, the lens should be treated, and we're going to talk about lenses in a little bit, but the lens should be treated as a tool, as a selection, just as much as I'm going to put a camera on a dolly or a jib, or am I going to, am I going to light this warm or soft, or, like all those types of factors. A lens is also a deciding factor. Do I want this at a 35 millimeter or a 50 millimeter? There's a difference there.
Absolutely. And it colors the whole tone of the message that you're trying to, a tight shot on a 50 is a lot different than a 24 tight. And it's going to convey a different emotion. And so having that flexibility and I know we're jumping ahead, but that it does make a big difference.
Yeah. So going interchangeable lens cameras, which again, there's lots of options, way the heck more than when we were first starting. But
no kidding.
So then where do you go? Do you go Sony? Do you go Canon? Do you go Red? Like where do you go? And I'm a big fan of Sony personally because there's so many options and they cram a lot more options into their cameras than some of the other brands do. But frankly, Blackmagic creates some beautiful image cameras and their user interface is really, really good. Canon, again, great imagery as well. Really what it boils down to is like, what lens package you want to get into, and is the camera adaptable to either what lenses you plan on using or can use. So like when I was first getting into interchangeable lens cameras, I had the 5D Mark II. And so that was EF mount. So I got a lot of EF mount lenses.
Canon 5D Mark II.
Okay. Thank you. And but when I got to the Sony, I switched over Sony, the E-mount allowed adapting to a lot more lenses. So I was able to take my EF lenses and use those on the Sony E-mount.
Right.
Great. Now Canon has gotten away from the EF mount, and now it's more the R mount or RF, or I forget everything. But so like the EOS R lens, that RF mount is... You can't put those lenses on an E-mount because they're all have that shallower flange depth. So fortunately, there's still EF mount lenses that you can purchase, but you kind of have to pick a lane and stick to it because you're going to be like you have Nikon glass. There aren't a lot of Nikon mount video cameras, so you're kind of limited to sticking with your Nikon camera as opposed to, again, with Sony or Canon or some other ones, you can adapt those a little bit more easily.
Sure. And I think that's one of the most important tips that I think you shared with me when I was starting years ago, was just pick a lane. Everyone gets so caught up on, is it Canon? Is it Sony? Is it, pick one. It's gonna be good. It's, hopefully you can get out and play with it. Go to Best Buy or somewhere, go to your local camera shop if you still have one around, you're fortunate enough, but play with it and see what feels right, see what looks, check out examples on YouTube, on Vimeo, find examples of the camera that you want to research and see if that matches your aesthetic. And if it does, knock yourself out. But I think that, a lot of people get so caught up on what name should I go with. And really what you came down to was it all depends on the glass. Invest in the glass and the body will follow. And so where do you start? Like, do I get a Sony A7S? Do I get a Sony FX30? Do I get a Sony FX6? Do I get a Sony Venice? Like where do I stop? And I think the best advice I can give, and I've given this before, but it's like find something that looks great to you and then stop where your pocketbook ends, because the analogy I've given before is like I have about a $10,000 home audio system, which for some people that's really expensive, and some people that's a drop in the bucket. I'm very happy with it right now, and there are lots of things that I upgraded
to that because I could hear the lack of either bass or response or all the different factors that went into why I was unsatisfied with my previous like sub $1,000 system.
Sure.
But I have a buddy that bought a $1,000 audio system, and he really liked it. And then he came over to my house and he listened to my $10,000 system. I said, "You hear a difference?" And he said, "Not really."
Yeah.
Like, great. Then you have the exact right
Exactly.
system for you. And it's the same thing with cameras. Like, there was a period in time where I thought that, I went from the Canon XH-A1, which was a standard video camera, to the 5D Mark II. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this shallow depth of field and the colors are more vibrant and the detail was better. Now, if I go back and shoot video on that camera, I'm like, it's so compressed and noisy and soft and like it's nothing compared to my current cameras. And again, I went with my Sony FS700 was my upgrade. I love that camera. Still use it occasionally, especially with the 4K recorder. But like going to the FS700, I'm like the detail is so much better, and I can shoot slow motion and all this kind of stuff. Better low light. And then I got the 4K recorder. I'm like, oh my gosh, this camera's brand new. It's totally different. And then I went to, some other cameras in my Red, and every time I would go up, I'm like, oh my gosh, the skin tones are better. But like, I would not have known that working with, if I just immediately stepped into that camera. Yeah. So get a camera that just looks great to you and fits within your budget. Yeah. It's really easy to do nowadays. It was a lot harder back in the day, but it's a heck of a lot easier to do that. And that's why I say if you pick a lane, so if it's Canon, Sony, Panasonic, Blackmagic, whatever it might be, then just plan that that's going to now be the thing that you stick with long term, because you are going to want to upgrade someday. Yeah. And if you upgrade to the next Sony and then the next Sony, well, great. You can just stick with that same lenses. And I had an A7S, which was my first full frame Sony, and I got some really nice high end shallow depth of field, like f1.2 lenses for that. And then when the FX6 came out, I was like, great, I can get like a nice cinema full frame camera with really good autofocus, and I already have like several $1,000s in glass. So it was really easy. If I had to buy that camera plus the several $1,000s in glass, that would have been a harder pill to swallow. But
I think that's another great thing to keep in mind is you're gonna be upgrading this eventually, but do it as we always say that let the tool match your skill. So if the tool is what is inhibiting your skill level, that's when you need to upgrade. But if you had, and I know you talk about this on the podcast before, if you had just jumped into your Red from your standard little cinema, your little pocket camera, you wouldn't have known what to do with it. It would have been way too much. So just investing in, the greatest, latest, and the greatest. And I think a lot of companies fall into this trap. It's like, all right, we got a media budget, let's dump into it. And they get, way too much, and they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to use it. And they end up just wasting a lot of money that they could have spent on other better things.
And to extend that, like each camera has its own workflow. Yeah. So, we have, one of the reasons that I have my Red, the next camera that I purchased after my Red Epic W was the Sony FX6. Yeah. And, you say, well, that's a bit of a step down. Well, the FX6, first of all, has built-in ND filters. The Red doesn't. It also has really reliable autofocus. Yeah. So then I got FX30 as kind of a B cam to that. And when I go out on a shoot where I'm either one-man band or it's a small crew like you and I will take the FX6 because that I can operate much easier on my own. Yeah. If I'm shooting on the Red, though, that requires a little bit more setup time. I have a nice set, a multi-$1,000 set of ND with built-in IR cut, and it's just a really great set. Yeah. So, but I have to swap those out every single time I'm changing exposure, the light changes or whatever. The lenses require manual focus, all that kind of stuff. So it's a different workflow. It requires typically an AC I prefer to have on set with that. A little bit more setup time and everything. Image is gorgeous. Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. But it does not, if I'm running and gunning, for sure, that's not the one I'm going to, if I'm in a lower budget shoot where I have to have smaller crews, I would rather have my Sony package. Yeah. And that's why I don't have just one or two cameras. That's why I have all these different cameras, because we work with such a variety of clients, everything from a few $1,000s to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And each one of those clients, either I would just straight up not be able to work with them, or I'd have to shoehorn a camera package into. I'd be like, your shoot doesn't need a red, but that's all I've got. So we're shooting on a red.
Yep.
And so if you're getting started and you're thinking about your workflow, cameras that make things easier. Again, a camera, like a lot of the newest generation of cameras have really reliable autofocus.
Yeah.
So being able to have that reliability and ease of use, built-in ND filters, certain things like that make life easier for you. And if you're just a one-man band, it's definitely something to consider as part of that workflow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we talked a lot about cameras. I'll talk briefly about lenses. We mentioned that too. There are some good places to start. I'm a big fan of the Sigma Art series. Their zoom lenses. They have two that cover Super 35 or APS-C sensors, which are their 18 to 35 f1.8 and their 50 to 100 f1.8. And if you were to get like a set of kit lenses, of cinema lenses, you typically would have like a super wide that would be in the 11 to 18 range, roughly. Then you would have a 24, a 35, a 50, an 85, and like a 100 or 135. That's what my set of 6 Canon Cinema Primes cover. And oftentimes you're having lenses in that range. It may not be 50, it might be 55 or 45 or something like that. But roughly, like that's kind of what you're looking at. So to have a lens that covers 18, 24, 35, 50, and 100, and 85 thrown in there too. And across 2 lenses, the Sigma Art series come in a variety of lens mounts. And it is like any photographer, any videographer that's just getting started, to have a zoom lens that's f1.8 that's tack sharp. Yeah. I still use that those 2 lenses all the freaking time. And they're like together under $2,000. Yeah. It's such a steal. Right.
And this is a mistake that I made. I when I was investing in my photography kit, I went out and got, latest and greatest Nikon body and blew my budget there. And so I had to settle for, I have a 51.4 that I love. That was my one piece of professional glass. And the rest, they were all just, they were slow lenses. So, f4, f5.6, and they worked. It depends on what you're going to do. If you're shooting a whole bunch of landscapes, sure, that works. If you're trying to do portraits and interviews and corporate things, it might be tougher to have that slower lens. So I would say invest in the fastest lens possible. And the Sigma really is great. In fact, I rented one to bring to Africa just as a 35 1.8 for just portraits. And I just wanted to have that 35 style. Even though I had the 24-70, I still love that 35. The Sigma had such a unique caricature to it that it really made those images pop. Some of my favorite images of Africa came off that lens.
Yeah, and it can be a little clinical. Like some people don't, some people want like some characteristics from their lenses. The Art series have very little colorization to the picture, which can be, you can always add that in post too, but I highly recommend those. I just listed off all the different primes that you would potentially go after too. Those are ones to consider. But to your point, the fastest you can afford, the f1.2s are usually the most expensive. Then the f1.4s are the medium. F1.8s are usually a bit less expensive.
Nifty 50.
And the Nifty 50 is a great place to start. It's whatever camera you get, there's a Nifty 50 for it. Whether it's Canon, Sony, Nikon, and you can usually get those under $200 roughly because they're so widely used. Yeah. But you got to do your research because like the EF Nifty 50 was okay. It was a bit soft until you stopped down a few stops. Yeah. But the RF Nifty 50, tack sharp.
Really?
Tack sharp.
At 1.8?
And it's at 1.8, yeah. So do your research. Find out, because if you were to ask me, should I get the Nifty 50 f1.8? I would, for the EF, I would say look at probably the f1.4.
Sure.
It's a few $100s more if you can't afford the 1.2, which is a lot more.
Yeah.
But if you were to say the RF, I'm like, no, the 1.8's great. Yeah. I highly recommend it. It's worth it.
Yeah.
So that's about lenses. We could do a whole podcast on lenses because there's so many options out there.
All right, so we'll do one just on the cameras and then one just on the lenses.
Yeah. All right, but let's get into the next most important thing before anything else. lighting.
Yeah.
Lighting is so vitally important. Now, some people might say sound, and we will talk about that because 50% of video is audio.
Sure.
But I say lighting is so much more important because visually, that's what people are going to see in your portfolio. And it's the difference between shooting, available light and shooting, something that actually looks professional. Yes, audio is important. Again, we're going to talk about that. But I, as a cinematographer and as a video production company, people judge us looking at our content based on how we light it, how we lens it, how we shoot it, more than anything else. And I mean, frankly, there you could do a corporate video where you're not recording a single interview.
That's just it. Yeah. You could do a voiceover. You could do just music. Yeah. In fact, a lot of them do. That's what they prefer.
Exactly. So for lighting, the first and foremost thing that I will say is make your light bigger. That is something I say all the time. And I have a video on 5 tips for cinematic lighting on our YouTube channel you can check out. Where I talk a bit more about that, but that is probably the biggest and most important thing that people are making the mistakes of. I remember when I was first getting into filmmaking and I got a 24-inch softbox. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got a softbox, I got a soft light. And then I had a buddy of mine that was a DP that was many more years of experience. And he came over and I was like, can you show me how you light your stuff? And he took my softbox, ripped off the diffusion, we had a piece of foam board sitting by that was like a 4x8 sheet of foam board, propped it against the wall, flipped the softbox around, shot it into the foam board, and all of a sudden the skin tones, the softness of the light was just 10 times prettier than what I was doing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been doing it wrong this whole time.
And not because it was bounced off of something, but because it was bounced off of something that big.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then I started, okay, well then a 4x4 I need at least shooting that. And then I got like 6x6 silks. And now my biggest diffusion kit that I have is an 8x8, which sometimes is hard to set up. But and so I have invested in the biggest soft light that I can fit into our camera van, and that is somewhat easy and fast to set up. Because there's lots of ways to approach it. Like I've got several IntelliTech lights. One of my favorite lighting brands. I got lots of lights, but I really like the way that they approach their lighting and some of their tools. And I have their F800, which I think is discontinued, but it's basically an 800 watt bicolor LED. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's bright. And I've shot that into my 8x8 and used that as a key light, especially if you watch the behind the scenes of our cooking show video that we did. You can see how I lit our cooking show with just one giant soft light and then a few other lights filling in. But that light is heavy. It takes up a lot of space, especially the case that I have for it. And then the 8x8 silk takes a lot of space. It takes several square feet just to have it in your set. So the light that I use most frequently is the IntelliTech Mega Light Cloth.
My favorite piece of equipment that we have, hands down.
That was one of those ones where I'm like, I think I would use it a lot. And then we got it, and I'm like, I'm so glad I got it. There's lots of gear that I get over the years where I'm like, I think we'll use this. And then it sits on a shelf.
Maybe once or twice gets pulled out because it's like, we don't need it, but
I totally thought I was going to use it all the time. I remember I got like one of those easy rigs with the over the back thing. And then it just never got used.
But the Mega Light
some people use it all the time, but I just never did. But the Mega Light Cloth the only downside to that light is there is a little bit of a setup to it. Not too much, but every time that we set it up and take it down, there's all these little bungees and everything. Their newest one, their version 3, seems to even be faster, and it's in full RGB, so I'm looking to get one of those at some point. But the Mega Light Cloth, specifically the Mega, because that's their biggest one. It's roughly like 3 by 4 or 5 foot. Has a diffuser you can put right over the top of it,
and a honeycomb.
And it's a nice big light. It's great for a key light. It's great for a lot of things. I can shoot it through, like if I want to throw a silk in front of it so that I can get even bigger diffusion, I can. It's bright enough to do that. But the light in and of itself is just a big light. So I can put that and for interviews, the bigger the light, the better. It's always going to be softer unless you're going for like a really dramatic look, which is possible. Most of the time you want the light to be bigger and softer because it's more flattering to the talent. It's prettier to look at. If you look at Hollywood behind the scenes and you just like, we see what's on the camera all the time, but if you get like pull up some pictures, pull up some behind the scenes. If you're wondering like why does stuff look so cinematic? You look around the corner and you'll see they have like a 16 by 16 soft light with a ton of stuff throwing into it. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's why it looks like that.
If you ever want a treat, check out the behind the scenes for Nope, where they lit up the entire house out in the desert, and I forget how big it is, but it is, I mean, probably 30, maybe 40 feet by 30, 40 feet, probably even bigger. They had to have a whole crane in, and it's just this massive light. It's an incredible spectacle to see. Their behind the scenes is just awesome what they were able to do on that film. Yeah.
Study movies, because you'll see the behind the scenes, like Lord of the Rings, like Star Trek 2009 is a really good behind the scenes. If you can look for like some of the best filmmaking behind the scenes, those are just great resources, because then it opens up your eyes. When I saw, those are the lights that they're using. That's how they're using them. And it really explains and changes. When you start experimenting with that, you can see the results that you get. So at a bare minimum, make your light bigger. Now, I could do a whole podcast on lighting, and maybe we will, but that's like the first and biggest tip. If you're wanting to know where to start and invest, get as bright of a light as you can afford, and get as big of a silk or diffusion as you can afford, and then start from there. And your interviews, because that's really a lot of your bread and butter is interviews. Frankly, get good at interviews, because that's where most corporate places, whether you're a business, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're going to be lighting faces 90% of the time.
Jody, so there's a big trend now, especially with social media, for ring lights. What's your take?
It's
on
a
a
tool.
Ring light?
I'm not a big fan of using that too heavily. It's a look and an effect, and I'm okay with it for what it is. But just like I have some specialty lenses, like our probe lens and stuff like that, I would not shoot everything on the probe lens. I would use it for the right effect. They can be nice soft lights, especially if you don't put it right in front of the camera, if you put them to the side. But shooting directly through it, the thing that you get shadows that are like haloing the person directly behind them. You obviously get that signature ring light look in the eye, and it minimizes the shadows around it. So it's good for direct to camera stuff if that's the look that you want for beauty and high key. But it is a look. It shouldn't be like the one thing that you rely on.
And if you had to pick one light, if you're saying I need to invest in one for a setup, a mobile setup or whatever, probably wouldn't be that one, because it is going to be such a limiting tool.
Yeah, like I said, the biggest light that you can afford, and they're bigger ones than the Mega Light Cloth, but they get to be like really expensive, $5-10 grand. So fortunately, LED technology has gotten really cheap.
And NAB and CES just had a bunch of new technologies coming out where companies are really investing heavily in LED.
The last thing I'll mention with lighting is, if you can, and they make a version of it, get an RGB version.
Yes.
Because at first I thought like RGB is like kind of a gimmick, but I used to carry on gel kits with me if I need to make the light a little blue or red or whatever. RGB is handy, but don't just get an RGB. The light needs to be RGB WW.
Yes.
And because that RGB and that W, and the W is white, stands for white, and it's usually 3200 Kelvin and 5600 Kelvin. If it doesn't have that, what it's doing then is it's combining the RGB lights to create white, which is never an accurate white.
Yeah.
So it has to be RGB WW.
At which point you're going to be fighting it in post-processing.
Right.
So, we have the old adage, whether you pay for it now or you pay for it later, either way you're going to pay for it. Pay for it now. We have had so many times on set where it's like, we really need this to be, just have a slight blue tint, or, we're trying to overcompensate for the color of a wall that's all we had available. And so, we splash up, some blue or green on it, and it neutralizes it, balances out, and it makes a really gorgeous image. And it's like, oh gosh, if we didn't have this, it was going to be really tough to work around.
One problem that I've had in the past is like I had lights that I didn't realize in my earlier years of cinematography. I got some cheap LED lights, and they had a bit of a green cast.
Yeah.
And so I had some tungsten lights behind the talent.
Right.
And I had these LED lights with a green cast. And then I went to post, and I was like, I'm trying to pull the green out of their faces. But what happens is then the tungsten lights that are supposed to be 3200 Kelvin started shifting magenta.
Right.
So either the skin was green or the background was magenta. Yeah. So The one thing, the phrase that I've been coining lately is if you try to fix it in post, you'll regret it in the edit.
That's right.
So, and that's why like having the good quality lights with high color accuracy means that you can pepper them together and you're not going to have an issue where one light's too green or too red or whatever it might be.
So would it be safe to say for someone just starting out, the body of the camera is far less important than the lens and the light? So we start with the lens and the light and then see what your budget holds for the body?
Sure. Again, the cameras are you're going to change cameras over the years. Something like dynamic range, the ISO sensitivity, the autofocus. Like I have lenses that I've used since my 5D Mark II, but I haven't shot on my 5D Mark II in over 10 years. And so but I still use those lenses on newer cameras. So yes, to that. But that doesn't mean get the cheapest camera that you can. Because you will find out that there are cameras that are going to make your life easier for sure. But yeah, like lighting and lenses are really a good place to really focus your most of your budget initially, and then as you get better and as you outgrow your camera, you keep those same lighting and lenses. So next, sound. Sound obviously is still important. It's 50% of video, and again, like I said, the general rule of thumb with lighting is make your light bigger, and that's how you get prettier images. The general rule of audio is get your mic closer. Where most filmmakers and novice filmmakers make the mistake is they think that they can throw a shotgun mic on the top of their camera and roll from 6 feet away from talent, and they're, why is my audio roomy or noisy or whatever like that. There's a reason they have boom operators. There's a reason there's the ongoing joke of boom in the shot. We joke sometimes, like the boom shadow. You'll see it in movies. You'll see it all the time. So we'll start singing this. I'm seeing a boom shadow, boom shadow, boom shadow. Anyways, that was a weird tangent, but that became like an ongoing song on set so many times. But the reason that boom operator has a job and why it's so important is that they typically they need to get that boom as close to the talent as possible. And that's why there are times where we need an audio operator. There's like, of the things that I can pull my own focus, I can prep my own gear, I can set up my own lights, but I can't run camera and then have a boom in right next to talent. So that sometimes is a role that we just have to have. Obviously, lavaliers are another way to get the mic closer, but sometimes they're in frame, and so that's a conversation we have with our clients all the time. Is like, are you okay with the lav mic being visible? We'll get the most minimal ones possible, but it's still going to be visible. But a lot of times people prefer that, and we typically prefer that. Like it gives away that you're doing a video production. So unless we're running and gunning or doing event or news type stuff, we try to minimize that. So you can hide a lav under a shirt, but you can potentially get the rustling of it or, against the skin. It's never the perfect solution.
And I mean, I can't tell how many times we've had a great take, something perfect, and then, the talent is nervous. Maybe it's someone that's, not an actor or a professional actor. So they get nervous and they just make that little adjustment and all you got is a and it's like, oh, everything was great up till then. And hopefully you caught it. That's why, a sound engineer is so important on set. But if you don't, that is, you're just not going to get that portion of that.
So when it comes to sound and sound gear, you should have at least one good set of lav mics. I like Rode. I'm a big fan of them. I've been using them for years. There's other Sennheiser and other brands too, but Rode has been reliable, and I'm very happy with their brand.
I think Rode is a great one for the value. It's not bottom of the barrel, but it's not top of the line. But the quality that you get for that price, I think, is unmatched with just about anything else.
And Rode has their lav packs, which are standard lavalier packs, and they're great. But then they also have their Video Mic Go series, which are really tiny USB-C rechargeable ones, and those are great. I keep. I have mostly like 6 of the main Rode lav packs, but I have 4 of the Mic Go's. And I keep one pack in every one of my camera packages, so that I always have at least with my Sonys. So then I've got multiple Sony, Pelican cases where it's like lenses, batteries, camera, and the Rode Loft. So I always have that. If I just grab that and need to run and gun, I always have a mic pack in there. I have a whole station of our audio kit that includes several, good sets of headphones, a clapper board, the XLR cables, obviously. So in addition to lavaliers, your shotgun mic is a really important tool.
Yeah.
And a good pencil mic too is a good option because like that. Typically, so shotgun, I'm not an audio expert, but if you look at the pickup patterns on microphones, typically, like shotguns are good at getting farther away from them, but they also have a pickup pattern like directly behind them.
Right.
So if you're using a shotgun and like maybe it's by a ceiling or something like that, you can get sound reflection that comes in there. So a pencil mic has a shorter pickup. It's more like a bubble. And it doesn't have as much rear pickup. So having that for like an indoor where you can get the mic nice and close. And real quick tip, when you're aiming your mic, again, get it as close as you can off frame, but don't aim for their face, aim for kind of right their chest. That's like the best place to really position that mic. And then you usually get the best pickup pattern with that.
Tony's hot tips.
Yeah. And again, I learned that from other people, but, and then finally with audio, some cameras have good preamps, and that's a really important thing to know about your camera. Does it have good preamps, and will it be good to record audio directly into it? Because everybody wants to record audio into their camera because then I don't have to sync it in post, and it's one extra step that I don't have to deal with. And if you're doing tons of interviews and you've got all these clips, it's an extra step. It's not the end of the world, but it's an extra step for sure. So if your camera doesn't have good preamps, then you're going to get noisy video or audio, and it's not going to be good. So then you need to record dual system, and dual system audio is going to an external recorder. I use Zoom as my recorders, most of them. Although we have right over here the Rodecaster Pro 2, which is a nice 4-channel. It's got a lot of audio effects in there. So de-essing and noise reduction and auto gate and a lot of great tools in addition to the pads and sound exactly. I always have to stop Ben from playing with that too much, but
it takes great restraint.
It's physically, it isn't like something that you can just throw on your side and run as an audio. That's why I still have my Zoom recorders. But it is really nice for if you are going to be like stationary and you have like an audio card or whatever, it's definitely something to consider. But an audio recorder can be anywhere from a few $100s to like $1,000 or $2,000. But good audio is good. And the final thing I'll say about audio too is have somebody that has a decent set of ears listening to it. I have partial hearing loss in one of my ears, so I never trust my ability. Now, if I have to be the one that's doing it, I can do it. But if there might be noise in the background, there might be a hissing in the line because of bad preamps or something like that, I might not hear it until we get to the post, and my audio guy's like, what the heck, man? Yeah.
We, and it's something, so this is just a little anecdote. When we were filming with the Blizzard, we were filming their Strictly Blizness podcast on location up in Houghton at Mishtech, and we were setting up, and I whenever we shoot, you say, hey, Ben, can you take ears? Because my ears are better. But that week, I had come down with like a cold or something that settled in my ears, and I lost hearing in one of my ears. Didn't think about it because it didn't really affect me. I could still hear fine out of the other. But then I started trying to set up the audio, and we had 2 channels. We had 2 people on 2 different channels, and I could not figure out. I changed out the batteries on one of the talent. I changed out the microphone 3 times. It took a good 25, 30 minutes for me to realize I just did this. And then she sounded fine, and the other person was completely silent. So yeah, it is very important that you have someone that can actually hear, or just if all else fails, just flip your headphones around and just make sure it's not you.
There you go. All right. So we talked about camera, lenses, lighting, sound, and finally we're going to talk about today motion.
Yeah.
Because there's Rick Berman, one of the producers for executive producers on Star Trek of the 90s. He often said like it's motion pictures. Either the camera should be moving or the talent should be moving. Like that was kind of his rule of thumb. Now, that's a very loose perspective to have, and I wouldn't put that in every single thing. But for sure, it's motion.
Yeah.
Like this, we're not just taking a picture. We want the camera can be moving. It should be motivated in that motion, not just whipping around everything. Yeah. But I will say when we're shooting corporate videos where it's very dry and the subject matter is or we want to really showcase a location or whatever like that, I try to keep the camera moving as much as I can. Yeah. Gimbals, dollies, jibs, all that kind of stuff. You see the depth and motion of it, and video is a 2-dimensional medium. Yeah. But we live in a 3-dimensional world. So by moving the camera, we get to feel those dimensions. Yeah. And I'll even mention another rule of thumb that I say with my lighting is that's the 3 things that lighting does is it should expose the image so you can see it. Yep. It should set a tone and a mood, but then it also should allow you to accentuate the dimensionality of it. So correct. Another rule besides make the light bigger is also always be backlighting, trying to find ways to show the texture of that image. And so by backlighting it, you see the texture of something much more than if you front light it all the time. Yep. And it's the same thing with motion, allowing the camera to move so you can see the depth in the scene, follow the action of a character, whatever it might be. Just as much as lighting can set emotion, camera motion can set emotion. Yeah. And so like say somebody's walking into a frame. If you just dolly with them, so like say you have an actor sitting down and then you have an actor that's walking into a frame. And we're following, say like this is the protagonist and this is a mysterious character that we're meeting. Yeah. If the camera is stationary and that character walks into the scene, we're following, the audience feels like they're relating to the person that was already sitting there. Correct. But if we did a little bit of a dolly move as the person walks into the scene, all of a sudden we're relating to the protagonist that's walking into the scene. Didn't do anything else. Right. Didn't relight it, didn't do nothing. Yep. It's just that camera motion right there now makes you relate to one person over another. Yeah. I'll bring up a funny story real quick. When we were early in the days of Creative Edge, we did a lot of jewelry TV ads because Jimmy, our previous partner, was really experienced in that. And we were looking at some of our competition out there, and there's one guy that was doing these ads, and he was parodying the Cialis commercials where like the couple would be like in the bathtub and they would be holding hands or whatever like that. But the guy that made these ads was showing like a couple the guy was handing her a ring and showcasing it. But he shot it. So he shot it like in like a wooded area, probably because he couldn't afford a beach or whatever like that. But then he shot it handheld. Oh gosh. And the thing you may or may not realize when you shoot handheld, typically it's either like for fight scenes where you want kind of this chaotic energy or point of view. Sure. So when the person's walking handheld and walking up to the people on in the bathtubs, it really feels like some person is creeping up on this couple. Yeah. So what was meant to be like this cute like ad, it felt super creepy, and like as an audience, you're like, why is this creepy? And it's because of the camera motion. Yeah. It's creating an emotion that's associated with something else that wasn't the plan. So that's why it's so important to understand what camera motion does to an image and to a scene, because it creates emotion. Yep. And so investing in the right tools, again, I've already talked about them a few times. A dolly is probably the first place that I would start. Sure. The reason I would start with a dolly is because it doesn't require any counterweights or any additional, so you can either do a slider, or which is like a self-contained, system that has a little slide carriage on top of it, and then it slides back and forth. Or you can do something more like a rail system. So then that has like separate rails that you would set up, and then you put the slider on, or rail dolly on top of it. You can get all the way up to like a floor dolly where you've got rails that sit on the floor, and then a tripod that goes on top of it. And each time you go up that, there's more setup time and more stuff to carry around. If you have a small enough camera package, a nice slider works great. Sure. But if you need to do really big motion, that can be challenging to try and accomplish on that small slider, because usually they're around 3 to 5 feet.
Yeah. I think something that surprised me really getting into it was how much motion a small slider creates. You know, you think, what's the difference of just going here to here? And then you watch what that perspective shift is, and it's, you know, any more and it would be jarring. And so really something that simple, especially starting out, something that small, just to give a little bit of that perspective shift is going to be more than enough.
Yeah. So then the next thing to consider would be a jib. And the reason now jib is a bit more free in its motion, because you can theoretically do a bit of a dolly if you were to, you know, go out, you know, stay on a single axis and go there. But then you can do the jib rise. You can kind of do like cross axis. So there's more freedom in a jib, but there is certainly more setup and things to manage.
Yes.
Because of the counterweights that you need to have. It takes typically a little bit more space than a dolly system. And if you do things like swap lenses or other elements to your camera, then you have to rebalance it every single time.
Right.
So, and then you can't just like take the camera and go handheld, because then you'll create a slingshot and the thing will go catapulting.
Right.
So you'd have to like strip off the weights every time that you do that. So it's easy to come off of a dolly or slider, much more easy than it is to go on and off of a jib. So if the camera's going on the jib, it's going to stay there for a bit typically.
One thing that I will say, you know, I think you touched on it earlier, is creating what the jib does really well is it provides that three-dimensional aspect to it, where, you know, if you're just moving here to here, you're still staying in that two-dimensional plane. But I know we shot a manufacturing facility that was a really dry subject. The marketing company came and said, "Can you help us make this look pretty? We need to get some banner images. We need to get something." And immediately you said, "Yeah, let's do the pocket jib." And they were blown away, because you're able to start behind the machine, pull up and around, and it's this incredible cinematic shot of a mundane machine that would be hard to highlight otherwise. But having that extra access of motion really does make a difference.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of Kessler gear. You know, I've got mostly just Kessler gear across the board. Their stealth slider, their shuttle dolly, their cine slider, their pocket jib, their full size crane.
Yeah.
And their motion control system. And we're not going to talk about motion control too much today. You can check out lots of our other videos where we talk about it. The reason is because it just adds more complication to get good at the other stuff before you even touch motion control. But the last thing that I'll mention in motion, and there are lots of other tools, frankly, drones and all that kind of stuff. But the last thing I'll mention is a gimbal. Like a gimbal, you know, used to be, it would be a Steadicam. And Steadicams take a lot of work to balance. And again, similar to a jib, you change one thing and you got to rebalance it. Gimbals, I mean, back in the day, if you were watching our earlier stuff, you would see that, you know, we built our own. Sean and I built our own gimbal, and it took a lot of prep. Like we had to, every time we'd balance it, we had a laptop that we brought with it. We had to plug in and recalibrate it. Nowadays, it's so push a button, you're done. They made them so good. I'm a big fan of DJI, but I also have the Zhiyun ones as well. There are other companies too, but a gimbal allows you to, and that's why I say, like, if you got a slider that's 3 foot and you need to do a bigger move than that, get a gimbal, and then you can get those bigger moves. Now, there are gimbals that you can pull your own focus or have somebody else pull focus to you and have wireless video. But you know, having a camera with good autofocus pairs really nicely with a gimbal. So that's my 2 cents is just especially if you're getting started, have a good autofocus camera for on the gimbal.
And you know, 10, 15 years ago, it was the YouTube is full of DIY Steadicam, you know, where it was like, you know, get the PVC pipe and the free weights at a rummage sale. It is almost cheaper now to get a good gimbal than it is to build your own DIY Steadicam. The technology has come so far, especially if you're not looking for, you know, if you don't have a giant red camera, you know, if you have just if you're shooting a DSLR or even a smaller video camera, it's really easy to get into a solid gimbal for a relatively low price. Even more so if you're shooting mobile.
Yeah.
It's
And
incredible.
in the realm of motion, another thing to consider too, of course, is the fact that like the camera you pick is going to be really influencing the type of motion gear that you can have.
Yes.
If you have a larger camera like FX6, FX9, something like you're like, I can get a FS700 for pretty cheap on eBay or a Blackmagic Ursa, like one of the bigger ones. That's great. That's not going to go on the gimbal.
That's not going to go on anything.
And like your slider, like the really smaller sliders are going to, or you're going to need a bigger tripod. We didn't talk about tripods. Get a good tripod. Just get a good tripod. Just do that. Right after your camera, you have to get a good tripod. That's like fundamental.
Yeah.
So if you have like a smaller camera, like a DSLR, a mirrorless, like if you're looking between like an FX6 and an FX30 or FX3, if you get the FX30 or 3, you can put that onto a smaller gimbal and a smaller slider and a smaller tripod and a smaller jib and everything like that. Everything else becomes cheaper. If you get a full-blown FX6, now everything is more expensive.
Right.
And so that is a really important factor to consider too. So why would you choose the FX6 over an FX30? Well, it's got built-in NDs. It's got a lot more functionality. It's got the built-in XLR. So like there are advantages for sure by buying the bigger camera. But that's why I have an FX6 and an FX30.
Right.
I put the FX30 on the gimbal. I keep the FX6, for other stuff. Yeah. And by having multiple cameras in that scenario, I can then, we talked about like, taking it off the jib as a paint. I keep the camera on the jib. I have a different camera that I would use on a slider or gimbal or something like that. So we can be much, much faster.
Yeah.
That for us helps the client out a ton. It speeds up workflow. It's much better than constantly swapping cameras on and off different platforms.
Yeah.
I used to do that with like, like I have my Red Epic W, and we'd be doing a shoot where the clients, we promised them a Red. We're shooting on the Red. And then we put, try to strip down the Red, put the smallest V-Lock battery I have on it, take off the side handle, the top monitor, and get it really, really compact. Yeah. And it takes several minutes to do that. And then we balance it on the gimbal. So production stops while we're doing that.
Yeah.
Now I've got a Komodo that I can put on the gimbal. And so we're still shooting Red.
Yep.
And then that camera is ready to go, and we can pick that up and start shooting on it while I'm, the other camera, I can come right off of one onto the other. So for me, that is a hugely beneficial thing, and we're not stopping production anytime. Yeah. And as much as I love the gimbal, it does take a little bit to balance it and everything. So sometimes I have to weigh, is it worth that extra time? Yeah. Or are we just going to shoot a lot of stuff on the gimbal and compromise the other direction and be like, well, that doesn't need a gimbal shot, but it's on the gimbal, so I guess it's a gimbal shot. Because there, in as much as you can get really good at a gimbal, like there's still the gimbal look, like there's, as opposed to a jib or a dolly shot or even just a locked off shot. It is important to make sure that you're putting, the right motion to the right thing. So the last thing that I'll mention, I said that was the last category of gear, but just simply a computer, you make sure that you are getting something that can edit whatever. So if you're shooting AVC HD, XAVC, whatever, any of that type of footage, great. Most modern computers will do that. But if you're shooting ProRes, 4K, RAW, Red 8K footage, okay, that's going to be a bit more demanding. So make sure that whatever you're going to be shooting on, your camera can handle it. And last and most important within all that is have a good colored, accurate monitor. Yes. And then if, you can get some that are pre-calibrated, but one tool that we use a lot is we have the spider calibrators, and we run that on every single one of our monitors because we have tons of different computers with lots of different monitors here, and we just run it on every single one of our computers and make sure that they are as accurate as possible so that, we're not uploading a video and going, why are the skin tones red or green or whatever like that?
I think this is something that is wildly overlooked. Even myself personally, for a long time, I had a solid monitor, especially for photo editing. But it got to the point where I would deliver the photos to the client, and they'd be like, "Why are these so yellow?" And I'd look, they look great on my screen, and then I pull up on my phone, and it was like Oompa Loompas. I mean, it was so bad. So before I used the spider calibrator, I would have to guess. I'd be like, all right, this is slightly more yellow, so I'm just going to bring it more blue. And then I would render everything out, put it up, look it on my phone, and be like, oh, okay, no, that was too much. Just invest. They're a couple $100.
Yeah, they're not much.
It's worth every penny. Again, you're going to pay for it now or you're going to pay for it later. The amount of time that I spent was worth way more than the few $100 to get a. And the nice thing is, if you get a new monitor, you can still use it. It's not like a one-time. You will use it more than once.
Yes, and it'll work on multiple computers too if you have more than one. And bringing that up, that's a tip that I also suggest to people is like if you're not 100% comfortable, like typically your phone's going to be one of the most color accurate screens that you have. So you can double check whatever you're doing, whenever your final edit is, before you send it to your client. Just double check it on a few different computer screens, your phone, all that kind of stuff, because then you can see how they look. And sometimes I've had I did some graphic design for a customer, years ago, and we were doing a new logo for them, and it was a color logo, and I sent it to them, and it was on my color accurate monitor, but then they got to me and they're like, I don't like it, it's too magenta or whatever like that. I'm like, that color is not, it's red, it is not magenta. And so I went, and sure enough, theirs was super blue.
Sure.
And so then they were looking inaccurate, so I had to show them on their phone. I said, look it on your phone. They had an iPhone. I'm like, just look it on your phone and tell me if you still have issues, because that's going to be more color accurate than your cheap laptop that you got for $150. That's the cheapest screen possible.
Yep.
Usually laptop screens, unless they're good, like this Samsung one that I have here is a nice OLED screen. I trust this one, but a gaming laptop, which can edit your video great, almost always are more blue or less color accurate for sure.
And that's we're taking a lot of time for a lot of hot tips, but that's another one is I think it's hard to find a not gaming enter blank gaming monitor, gaming laptop, gaming. So that's what a lot of the market is flooded with right now, and they are designed to accentuate the action and the emotion. So they're going to have brighter, more punchy colors. The contrast is going to be higher. They're going to pop a lot more. So it might not be the most color accurate. That's why calibrating it, the screen or your laptop, and the calibrators can do both, it's going to make such a big difference, because it'll be able to tone it back down into a reality and something that is usable and actually looks more realistic. All right, so Tony, for all the people that have stuck with us this far, we have said, here's what you need to get into filming. If you could pick one camera, lens, light, and mic to start out with, what would you pick?
Again, I'm a big fan of Sony right now. I would either look at the FX6, or if that's too rich for your blood, the FX30 or FX3. And the difference between those two is that the FX3 is full frame, the FX30 is Super 35. As far as one lens, I would cheat and say look at the Sigma Art series, because those two lenses, now those only work on Super 35, so that they do have, I think, a full frame version. I've never used it, but that would be really cover a wide gamut. So consider those, and they make them on different cameras. So if you get a different, if you got a Canon or whatever like that, consider that. For microphones, again, Rode, I'm a big fan of. So shooting on you get a good lav pack, at least one, preferably two, because you times we're going to interview two people. I can't tell you how many times where I'm like, we went into an interview and it was like, we're going to shoot one person. They're like, can we put another person at the same time? I hate doing that, because I always have to compromise the lighting, the look, the shot, everything, especially if it's a 2-camera shoot. But you should have at least 2 lavs in your kit, and then a shotgun mic and probably a pencil mic, and then for lights, I'm a big fan of IntelliTech. That might be a little rich for some people's blood, but getting started with your main key light. I've told you this so many times. Start with your most important light is your main key light. And the biggest, brightest light that you can afford, start there, and then everything, you can get some 1x1s, some hard lights, some everything else to kind of mix it up. But that one key light is always going to be the best investment that you could possibly make. So whether it's a mega light cloth, or they have smaller versions, and there's other companies that have LED kind of like foldable lights. I like those because they're very portable. You can fit them into. You don't have to have a big camera van like us. You can have any vehicle.
Right.
Was there anything else in
No,
motion?
Motion. I mean,
like a good 3-foot slider.
Yeah.
And then maybe a gimbal, and then worry about a jib later.
Right.
Those you can easily get for under $500 each.
Yeah.
And then a good computer.
Yeah. And really, you can cheat with a gimbal. You can create some cool jib looking shots.
Oh yeah.
Especially if you get a ladder involved.
And one thing I love doing is putting my gimbal on a monopod.
Yeah.
And then you can lift it up, and like when I joke, it's like my wizard staff, and like you can kind of rest it when you're not using it, so you're not carrying that constantly. You can get some extra height. You can do it's putting a gimbal on a monopod is a great little hack.
And especially if you're in a manufacturing or in a facility, drone might not be too practical.
Yep.
But you put it up on a monopod, and all of a sudden you get a drone look. It's really neat. So
I'll say real quick with that. One thing that I did, I got like a 20-foot a GoPro pole years ago, and the newer GoPros have pretty good image stabilization. So we had a shoot that we had to do for Georgia Pacific in one of their facilities, and we couldn't bring a drone in there. They wouldn't allow it. But I stuck a GoPro on the 20-foot pole and just walked along, and the image, all my wobbling, the image stable, it looked like a drone shot. And that's actually way that cheaper than a drone. And you don't need to have a license or any of that kind of stuff. So a GoPro and a pole, that's almost as good as a drone for some stuff.
Yep.
All right, we're going to do a short pop culture corner because we went on for quite a while on our main podcast. But I'll talk quick. You talk quick. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds.
Yep.
Loving it. It's good. They did something interesting in not the most recent episode, but the one before that almost implies like another alternate reality, like Strange New Worlds, and some of the new like Star Trek Discovery you could interpret it as it's an alternate reality. Some fans have kind of complained. They're like, this doesn't make sense how it fits into the old canon of Trek. So I feel like the showrunners kind of almost threw that in there as like, if you want to think this is an alternate reality, then you can be happy with that. If you want to think it's still in the main canon, you can too. So that was an interesting direction. I'm still chewing on whether I like it or not, but I'm cool with it.
Kind of like an Inception, where it's at the end where it's like, is he dreaming?
Exactly. Yeah. You can make that decision yourself. And then I've been watching Secret Invasion.
That's what I was going to talk about.
Yeah. So 3 episodes in there, and I'm liking the spy thriller feel of it. This is all about how they stick to landing for me, because they've set up some big ideas, and but I also know that there's going to be an Avengers Secret Wars.
Sure.
So I know that it's not going to be the end of the story. It's probably, this is building up to that story, kind of like how WandaVision built up to Doctor Strange.
Yes.
Like if we just jumped into Doctor Strange, first of all, I'll be like, why is Wanda bad all of a sudden?
Yeah.
And but like WandaVision set up all of the character motivations for her to be a psychopath.
Right.
in that. And so I'm thinking that's probably what's happening, is that they're building up why whatever's going to happen in Secret Wars is going to happen.
We've talked about this before. I love being able to play in the universes again. And I think that Secret Invasion is a great way to be able to play in the Marvel universe without having to be in a full cinematic event. I would say the same thing about WandaVision. WandaVision was unique and delightful in its own. The way that they told the story and going through the different eras of TV was very unique, and I think just absolutely brilliant. So this is a much more kind of almost that. It almost has like a Dick Tracy-esque, like especially the opening scene of the first episode. I'm only a couple episodes in as well, but like where you're going through the dark European city streets and the chase scenes, and it has a fun feel to be able to play in again that I've really enjoyed. It's not an epic over the top, at least not yet. Where you have just multi-million-dollar battle scenes going on, but it's just a great story. Getting to you get to see Fury again, and some new characters, some old characters, and I'm a big Robin Scherbatsky fan, so being able to see anything that she's in she's just awesome. So
Yeah, no, I've been enjoying it. Again, I think this is going to be very dependent on how they finish it out. Because like a lot of these shows have been setting up movies to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like Loki led
right.
into Quantumania, and I know that story isn't done with that character, but like it gave us like a build up so that Thanos was built up over years of movies. If we just immediately jumped into a Kang Dynasty Avengers movie, it might have been like, okay, we didn't have a build up to this. So giving us the all those different variables of build up through TV and that drama, it's been nice.
Yeah.
So I'm enjoying it too. Like some of the stuff has been hit or miss with Marvel lately. But I just always enjoy the tonal shift. I've mentioned that before, like each show and each movie having its own feel to it, I think is what Marvel has done the best.
Yep.
Out of DC started doing it more recently, but a lot of time the tonality of the shows were very consistent.
Yes.
Star Wars especially was very consistent.
Yeah.
Star Trek had that kind of anthology feel to it where they would bounce back and forth between different tones. So I really like that Marvel can do that. And so like, if you like spy stuff, here's this. And if you only want to watch one show or whatever like that, that's fine. You can be that kind of fan too.
Yeah.
But I find that it's a lot easier to avoid franchise fatigue when one movie is a space, opera, and then the next one is a spy thriller, and then the next one's like a comedy, whatever. Like, so like you're just bouncing around a lot.
And the stories all are entwined. Yeah.
Which is enjoyable because what if like you were watching what if Mission Impossible and I'm trying to think of another movie, Star Wars. I don't know, what if like those two franchises were combined? And like that's essentially when you have Guardians of the Galaxy and Secret Invasion, like technically two different genres like that are in the same universe.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
That's exactly right. What are your thoughts on having, because Disney is doing a lot of things on Disney Plus. They're putting a lot of the MCU on Disney Plus only.
All right. So I don't know what question you're about to ask, but I have a thing that I really want to talk about.
Okay, go for it.
That.
Yeah.
We might be coming to the end of the golden age of streaming in the next few years.
Okay. Hot take.
And because I'm noticing like with Star Trek, for example, like they poured in 2021, 22 might have been the best years for Trek because things are starting to come to an end. Like Picard season 3 is the end of that show. The Discovery season 5 is the end of that show. They still have other shows that are running, and there's a lot of fan desperate clamoring for a Star Trek Legacy continuation after Picard season 3.
Sure.
But recently they announced that Paramount was just selling off or getting rid of a handful of shows, and one of which was Star Trek Prodigy, which was a very well received show, immensely well received. It was the first kind of kid show for Star Trek.
Sure.
Like Star Wars had like the Clone Wars and some of those Rebels and stuff. This was the first one for Star Trek. It was so well received. Everybody loved it. But the execs used it as a tax write-off. So it wasn't just Star Trek Prodigy that got the axe, but it was weird because that not only did the show get canceled, like they were already like most of the way through season 2.
Yeah.
Instead of releasing that on Paramount Plus, they canceled it and then they immediately removed it from the thing. So right now there is no streaming thing that you can watch it on.
Interesting.
You can buy it on like Amazon Prime,
Sure.
Or you can buy or iTunes, or you can buy the Blu-ray.
Yeah.
But even as of that, they only had the first half of the first season. They didn't have the second half of the first season even
weird.
available right at this moment.
Sure.
It's coming out soon in September, but we're seeing execs, and this happened. Willow season 1 was removed, even though Disney owns the rights. So Paramount owns the rights to Star Trek.
Yeah.
They're using these as like tax write-offs to basically say this was a failed show. So, and in order to do that, they can't continue selling it.
Sure.
So they have to completely remove it. So Star Trek Prodigy, they're hoping that another network might pick it up, like maybe a Netflix or something like that, and that the season 2 that they're mostly done with can actually come out. But it's really bizarre. We're seeing this across multiple streaming places that they're trying to, like, they're hemorrhaging money and they're looking for ways. So for a show that has come out that you would think, okay, will this happen to a Star Wars thing? Will this happen to, like, you would think like all of the stuff, like for a long time, Paramount's like, we're the home of all Star Trek.
Yeah.
But we now canceled and removed a show that is not available anywhere, aside from buying the discs or whatever. And so it's just weird that this is happening. You know, Willow, at the very end of the season 1, they're like, they set it up. This is going to be a season 2 and a season 3.
Yeah.
And then there's this back and forth. Is it canceled? Is it not? But for them to literally remove it and you can't watch it, that's, you know, again, these are execs that are padding their pocketbooks and they're looking for tax write-offs and stuff like that. So I'm just worried that we might be at the end of the golden age of streaming. It could be coming to an end, and there might be networks that start merging or buying each other out, or I don't know.
I think it's been happening for a while because everyone saw the benefit of streaming. So everyone was like, great, we're going to take our stuff and we're going to stream it. And what set up streaming so well is, I mean, Netflix was the predominant one, and you had everything on Netflix. I didn't need to go anywhere else. I didn't need cable TV because I had Netflix and I had enough to watch there. And then it was, well, The Office is going to be taken off and they're going to go to Peacock, and this one is going to get taken off and it's going to Paramount, and this one's only available on Hulu, and now Amazon Prime, and now they've started making their own shows. So it's like, okay, maybe it is worth having some of these. But you know, to your point, I think a lot of even these, you know, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Netflix originals, they're scaling back as well, and they're feeling that tightening of the belts. So I think you're right. I think, you know, we went from everything in this conglomerate of cable to completely wildly disjointed, and now I think we're going to have a pendulum swing back to some consolidation. Hopefully, I think that would be better for the consumer. Because, you know, it was like, we don't want to have a $200 cable bill, but you'll have, you know, $30 at Netflix now, and, you know, 20. And so it's like, well, I'm back paying the same amount. And is it really a good user experience?
Well, it reminds me of like Nintendo, in the sense of like, there are a lot of Nintendo fans that, you know, like there's so many great games that Nintendo's released over the years. And some people just want to have a place to continue to play them.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like the people want to pirate games necessarily. It's that there was no way to play a game that I wanted and without, you know, booting it up on Dolphin Emulator or whatever.
Sure.
And so, you know, Nintendo, I think, is in recent history is starting to do that, where they've re-released a lot of games like Pikmin. Not only Pikmin 3 on the Switch, but now 1 and 2 are available. The Metroid Prime remastered, and like a lot of these games are finally coming out. So that's great.
Yeah.
But to my earlier point, like when a show that you really like, you can't get it anywhere.
Sure.
You know, it's one thing for it to be like, okay, yeah, great. Like I got to subscribe to Paramount Plus if I want to watch Trek or something like that. But for them to remove it for a tax write-off, gosh, that's frustrating.
Well, I mean, that leads in perfectly to what my question was, is what are your thoughts on then putting major story arcs behind a paywall that is tumultuous, that has the possibility of coming up on the chopping block? Likely, maybe not. Possible, absolutely. You know, to your point, the execs, if they are seeing the bottom line dropping and they're just trying to pad their pockets as much as possible, and it makes sense to cut something. I mean, we see that happen. That happened in syndication TV as well. You look at Firefly, you know, or there's a lot of other examples. But what do you think about putting major story components to your WandaVision, only available on Disney Prime? If you jump in, yes, you could probably, you know, the anthology works as it's on its own. But what do you think about putting like major story arcs behind?
I don't mind paying for a thing. Like, listen, I own almost all of Star Trek. I still subscribe to Paramount Plus and watch it on there, because I mean I could just watch it. You know, I've got my Blu-rays and Next Generation, but I subscribe to Paramount Plus because I want to watch, you know, the new Trek as it comes out. But I also want to support future Trek and like, you know, other things that they've released. So, you know, I want my my demographic and you know the metrics of my viewership to show up in their feed and then make a difference. Like Picard season 3 was the first time any Star Trek show had breached the top 10 of the Nielsen ratings during the time that it had come out, and that was a big thing. People were so. You know, like the fandom was liking it so darn much, and other people were subscribing to watch it, that it broke through in that.
Sure.
So I don't mind paying for a thing that I want. What's frustrating is is getting emotionally invested in a storyline that could, again, like Firefly, like the Sarah Connor Chronicles, like all these shows that came and didn't survive a single season. And it's like, I got frustrated as a, back in the day as a, consumer. I'm like, I'm not going to take this seriously if you're not going to take it seriously.
Yeah.
So I started only watching shows once they had a few seasons into them,
Sure.
which on television is one thing, but like streaming, they look at viewer habits to dictate if they're going to continue running a show.
Sure.
So you kind of have to be committed or not.
Yeah, I guess that's a really interesting point. And I'm thinking of just strictly the selfish consumer of, I can get, my music I can get for free. I can get a lot of movies for free. I have all these different streaming options. I don't want to have to pay for something, but really that's, we live in a capitalist society, and a lot of these, they're a business. They're trying to make money. And if they're not making money, and if we're saying, I don't want to pay for it, that's fine.
I mean, you and I work in the world of video production, and we have clients that are like, I could just take my cell phone and shoot this, and and we come to them with a multi-$1,000 proposal, and they're like, why do I not use my cell phone?
Right.
And we have to justify that because like should get better results, a better story, a better impact, and so. It's hard for me to say that to a client and turn around and be like, well, I'm not willing to pay $10 a month for a thing that I really enjoy and care about. So that's my 2 cents about it.
That's a good point. I'm still going to pay them begrudgingly.
I have no problem paying money for a thing that I love.
Yeah.
I've spent so many thousands of dollars on Trek memorabilia and shows and stuff like that over the years. Yeah. I don't mind spending the money. I don't want to be having to worry about, the continued existence of a show or something like that.
And really it's, the way that we consume media has changed. So rather than spending that money at the box office or buying the DVD set or whatever it would be, you're just paying your, less than a movie ticket and popcorn to watch it on their service. All right. That helps.
Especially when when like for Paramount Plus specifically, when you get like, the new Top Gun or the new what else came out on there? Oh, the Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure. Yep.
I didn't end up seeing that in theaters, and I was interested in buying the movie, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's Paramount. I'm going to see it. It'll come out on Paramount Plus, so I continue my subscription and enjoy that. So like things like that, where it's like, okay, like they continue having content, the Mission Impossibles and things like that. Like I used to buy those. I haven't purchased them, because I can continue watching them there.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. So, great point.
All right. This was a long episode, but a really good one.
Thank you for those who stuck around.
Yep.
If you enjoy what you saw, feel free to click the like button, click subscribe if you haven't already.
Tell everybody about it.
Tell some people about it. That'd be nice. And we'll catch you next time.